In this episode, we're going to focus on how security leaders earn and keep real business support, because even the best security ideas struggle when they are framed as vague fear or endless spending. Brand new learners often picture security as a simple moral good, so it seems like leaders should always say yes to security work automatically. In the real world, every organization has limited money, limited time, and limited attention, and security competes with product features, customer support, hiring, and operations. That means security leadership includes persuasion, translation, and prioritization, not just technical knowledge. When you can explain value clearly, show costs honestly, and discuss trade-offs like an adult, you become a partner to the business instead of a barrier. The goal is not to win every argument. The goal is to create decisions that reduce risk while keeping the organization functioning and competitive. By the end, you should be able to describe a practical way to talk about value, cost, and trade-offs so security work is supported and sustained. A useful starting point is recognizing that business support is not a single moment where someone approves a project, because it is an ongoing willingness to allocate resources and tolerate change. Support looks like budget approvals, but it also looks like teams making time for security tasks, leaders backing enforcement when there is resistance, and decision-makers staying engaged when issues arise. When security work is framed poorly, it can sound like an endless stream of obligations that never produce visible benefits, and that framing drains support over time. When security work is framed well, it sounds like an investment in stability, trust, and the ability to operate without chaos. This matters especially in cloud environments, where systems evolve quickly and a weak security posture can turn small mistakes into large incidents. A beginner misunderstanding is thinking security is only about stopping attackers, when it is also about preventing expensive disruptions, protecting customer relationships, and keeping options open for growth. If you can connect security outcomes to things the business already cares about, you are building the foundation for lasting support rather than one-time approval. Value is the first pillar, and for security, it often means reducing the likelihood or impact of bad outcomes that would harm the organization. Value is not just about preventing a breach headline, even though that is a vivid example. Value also includes preventing downtime, preventing data loss, reducing fraud, reducing rework caused by insecure design, and maintaining trust that keeps customers and partners willing to engage. In cloud security, value can show up as fewer misconfigurations, faster detection of drift, cleaner access control, and more predictable incident response. A key beginner concept is that value can be expressed as risk reduction, but risk reduction needs a story that is grounded in reality, not just scary possibilities. If you say a control reduces risk, you should be ready to explain which risk, how it could occur, and what the consequences would likely be. The best value statements also connect to business goals, such as supporting reliable service delivery or protecting sensitive customer data that the company must safeguard to remain credible. When value is concrete, business support becomes easier because leaders can see what they are buying. To communicate value in a way that lands, it helps to translate security outcomes into business language without losing technical truth. That does not mean you hide details. It means you choose the right level of detail for the decision. For example, instead of describing a control as improving identity policy, you might describe it as reducing the chance that one stolen account can access critical systems. Instead of describing encryption settings, you might describe it as limiting the damage if stored data is copied or exposed. Instead of describing logging configuration, you might describe it as enabling faster investigations and reducing the time you spend blind during incidents. The underlying technical reality still matters, but the business tends to decide based on impact, urgency, and confidence. Another beginner misunderstanding is thinking the business only cares about money, when it also cares about reputation, customer churn, contract requirements, and operational stability. Security value often protects those intangible assets, and the role of the security leader is to make the intangible feel concrete. When you consistently explain value this way, stakeholders begin to anticipate the logic rather than resisting it. Cost is the second pillar, and it must be discussed honestly, because security loses credibility when it pretends controls are free or painless. Cost includes direct spending, like tools and services, but it also includes labor, time, training, operational overhead, and the friction introduced into workflows. In cloud environments, costs can also include increased complexity, slower deployment cycles, and potential performance impacts. A common beginner mistake is assuming the only cost is the price tag of a security product, while ignoring the real-world cost of adoption. A strong leader acknowledges that every control consumes resources and can create trade-offs for speed and convenience. This honesty builds trust because stakeholders feel respected rather than manipulated. It also helps security teams make better decisions, because you can compare controls based on the total cost of ownership, not just the purchase price. Sometimes the cheapest tool creates the most labor, and sometimes a more expensive solution reduces labor and reduces risk more effectively. When cost is framed as a full picture, the business can make clearer decisions and avoid unpleasant surprises later. Cost conversations also need to include the cost of doing nothing, because security decisions are rarely between spending and not spending. They are usually between paying a controlled, planned cost now or accepting an uncontrolled, potentially larger cost later. The cost of doing nothing might include the time spent responding to incidents, the time spent rebuilding trust, the cost of downtime, the cost of regulatory obligations, and the opportunity cost of delaying other work to handle emergencies. In cloud security, doing nothing can also mean allowing configuration drift to accumulate until the environment becomes unpredictable and fragile. Beginners sometimes assume that risk only matters when a dramatic event happens, but a weak posture also produces slow, constant inefficiency, like repeated access problems, repeated misconfigurations, and repeated urgent fixes. Those inefficiencies have a cost, even if nobody labels them as security costs. A leader who can explain both sides of the cost equation helps stakeholders see that security is not an optional luxury, but a way to reduce chaotic spending and chaotic effort. This is how security becomes part of operational discipline rather than a special request. Trade-offs are the third pillar, and they are where mature security leadership shows up, because trade-offs are unavoidable. Every security decision changes something else, such as usability, speed, flexibility, or cost. When leaders pretend there are no trade-offs, they either lose credibility or design controls that people bypass. A healthier approach is to treat trade-offs as design inputs, not as objections. For example, if a control introduces friction, you can discuss how to reduce that friction through better defaults, clearer roles, or safer automation. If a control costs money, you can discuss whether it should be applied broadly or only to high-impact systems. If a control slows deployment, you can discuss how to integrate checks into normal workflows so speed returns once habits are established. Beginners sometimes think trade-offs are a sign the security idea is wrong, but trade-offs are simply the reality of constrained systems. The leader's job is to decide which trade-offs are acceptable for the risk being reduced and to communicate those decisions clearly so teams can plan. When trade-offs are acknowledged, business support increases because decisions feel grounded and fair. One of the most practical ways to talk about trade-offs is to compare options, not in a marketing way, but in a decision-making way. There is often a low-cost option that reduces some risk, a medium option that reduces more risk with moderate effort, and a high option that provides strong protection but requires more commitment. The key is to help stakeholders understand the difference in outcomes, not just the difference in features. A beginner misunderstanding is assuming the strongest control is always the correct choice, when the correct choice depends on impact, likelihood, and business constraints. For example, for a system that handles sensitive customer data, stronger controls may be justified even if they add friction. For a low-impact internal tool, a lighter control may be acceptable if it keeps teams productive. This approach also helps avoid all-or-nothing thinking, because stakeholders can choose a path that fits current reality while leaving room to improve later. When you frame security decisions as trade-off choices with clear outcomes, you invite stakeholders into partnership rather than forcing them into compliance. That partnership is a core ingredient of business support. Another critical part of building support is learning how to talk about uncertainty without sounding unsure, because security decisions often involve incomplete information. You rarely know exactly when an incident will occur or exactly how an attacker will behave, but you can still make reasonable, defensible decisions. A strong leader uses uncertainty as a reason for layered defenses and continuous checks, not as a reason to freeze. You can explain that the goal is to reduce the chance of failure and reduce the impact if failure occurs, even if you cannot promise perfection. Beginners sometimes think leadership must speak in absolutes, but in reality, stakeholders often trust you more when you acknowledge uncertainty and show how your plan handles it. This is especially true in cloud environments where systems change frequently and drift is natural. You can build support by explaining how you will measure progress, detect deviations, and adjust over time. That makes security feel like an active management practice rather than a one-time purchase. When leaders see that you are not selling certainty, but you are selling a disciplined approach to uncertainty, they are more willing to commit resources and attention. Business support also depends on timing and framing, because the same security request can be received very differently depending on when and how it is presented. If you bring security late, as a surprise demand after a product is nearly ready, it will feel like a blocker even if the request is reasonable. If you bring security early, as a set of guardrails that help teams avoid rework, it feels like enablement. This is why security leaders often focus on integrating security into planning and design conversations, where trade-offs can be managed before they become expensive. Another beginner misunderstanding is thinking persuasion happens through one strong presentation, when in reality, it happens through consistent small interactions that build credibility. When you repeatedly show up with clear value, honest cost, and thoughtful trade-offs, stakeholders begin to expect that you will be reasonable. That expectation is valuable because it reduces resistance when you do need a firm boundary. Support grows when people believe you are trying to help the business succeed safely, not trying to win arguments. It is also important to address the human side of business support, because people support what they understand and what they feel included in. If security decisions appear to be made in isolation, teams feel controlled rather than guided, and they are more likely to resist or quietly bypass. When you engage stakeholders early, listen to their constraints, and reflect those constraints in your plan, they feel respected. Respect does not mean giving up on security. It means shaping security in a way that can actually be adopted. For example, if a team worries about losing productivity, you can propose a phased approach that reduces risk quickly while leaving time to refine processes. If a leadership team worries about cost, you can propose a minimum viable set of controls with clear milestones that demonstrate value before expanding. This approach turns support into a shared outcome rather than a grant of permission. Beginners should understand that security programs are built through relationships, and relationships are built through consistency, transparency, and follow-through. When stakeholders feel the process is fair, they become allies instead of obstacles. Measuring and communicating outcomes is another powerful way to sustain support, because support fades when stakeholders cannot see progress. Security outcomes can be invisible when nothing bad happens, so leaders need meaningful indicators that show improvement. These indicators might involve reductions in high-risk configurations, increased coverage of monitoring, faster remediation time, or fewer recurring access issues. The specific metric is less important than the discipline of choosing metrics that inform decisions and connect to the value story. Beginners sometimes think metrics are only for audits, but metrics are also for leadership because they help you show that the organization is getting something in return for its investment. Metrics also help you adjust trade-offs, because if a control creates too much friction for too little benefit, the metrics can reveal that. When you communicate metrics honestly, including where progress is slow, you build trust. Trust supports future investment because stakeholders believe you will not hide problems. Over time, metrics turn security from an abstract concern into a managed program with observable results, which is exactly what business leaders want. As we close, remember that building business support for security work is not about using fear or jargon to force agreement, because those tactics rarely hold up when priorities shift. Value is the story of what security protects and enables, expressed in business terms that connect to real outcomes like trust, resilience, and reduced disruption. Cost is the full picture of what the organization must invest, including labor and friction, balanced against the cost of chaos and incident-driven rework. Trade-offs are the honest acknowledgement that every choice changes something else, and mature security leadership is the ability to choose and explain those changes in a way that stakeholders can accept. When you consistently present security work through these three lenses, you invite the business into informed decision-making rather than demanding blind faith. That approach builds durable support, which means security initiatives get completed, maintained, and improved over time instead of stalling after the first wave of enthusiasm. Ultimately, business support is the fuel that turns security intent into security reality, and learning to earn that fuel is a core leadership skill.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.